Maybe not. Okay. So before I jump into the solution, I just want to highlight. I know everybody talks about identity, but it's not really something we think about day to day. But identity is so fundamental for every interaction we do. Identity is somewhere for this. Whether it's between people, between companies, companies and individuals, it's all over the place. But we just don't feel it. We don't think about it every day. Access to anything like financial services, whether it's democracy, like voting, anything has different type of need for identity. It's often combined with reputation. But even if you have, like if you want to get food stamps and other things, there's always a need of like anti-civil attacks and other things. So it's like it's all over the place, even if it's maybe not as present as we think about this. In the last 20 years, we have more and more online accounts. So everybody creates around 20, 30, 50 online accounts. And in many of these accounts, you can consider them as well as some form of identity. Not only your social accounts like LinkedIn, Facebook, which act as like your identity in many aspects. But it's all over the place, and you build reputations in all of these systems, but it's always contained in the systems and becomes more and more. So what the challenges are today is that many of these data points or people are interacting with are very siloed. So that the solutions or the data you still get really right. Just okay, I use this one now. Okay, so better. Okay, so better. As part of this, sharing your data is a huge pain. So everybody goes through this standard process of you're signing up for a new insurance, for a new bank, something else. You always go through the process of sharing your data again and again. So for companies, that creates like every company stores this information at multiple places, or at least once if it's an online shop. So there's within the government even where you can argue, okay, why are you doing the same process like 5 times? Even within a bank, you might have like multiple times that you go through this process because it's siloed and there are multiple reasons for this. It's prone for error, cyber attacks. So data is just a general thing. You hear Equifax attacks and so on. And for user, it's just this. I don't know how many passwords you maintain, or maybe just one. I think it's just a general problem people have. Personal information is all over the place, and it's really not updated. So if you lose your credit card, you go in 20 times to different accounts and update it. So that's kind of a general situation where identity is, the identity situation is not really great. But now we're facing the blockchain ecosystem. So in that space, many of the solutions we have today cannot really cope with it. So your ID card and other things are not ready to interact with any blockchain systems. So one thing, what's really important for this is that you link your real-life identity to some form of a private key. We assume this in all these presentations, like, oh yeah, there's a private key, we're signing it, it's all great. But this is like one of the fundamental things. How do you map a person to a signature or to a private key? That's kind of one of the things. Private keys are not easy to manage for people today, so how do you make it very user-friendly? Like writing down 12 words for 10 different accounts gets really messy, and so over time, like, how do you deal with this? And if you lose your keys, how do you get access back to your identity? These are like really fundamental challenges we need to solve to make blockchain work. Obviously, signing Ethereum transactions is key. So what we do with uPort is we're building a user-centric identity platform, which we can use for any kind of interactions where like, to sign in, to sign transactions with Ethereum, which is really at the moment mainly focused on end users. So what I'll show you in a demo in a second is like serverless login, user-centric key management. So the users will not even actually see that there are keys involved. We can store personal information on the phone, which you can then selectively disclose to others, and so on. I will not go through all the details. We're now supporting already like public chains, but also private chains. So for interactions, if you need it, like if you have a private chain and you want to have users, actually end users, to interact with the blockchain, either you can simply store the keys, but then you don't need a blockchain because then it's actually still you are in control of every transaction. So you need to give it to the end users. We're working on SDKs and other things, so I'll keep this a bit shorter today. That's the only like diagram explaining very conceptually how the interaction will look like. So the mobile phone generates private keys, and we have 2 smart contracts which are part of uPort, which are deployed. One is in contract for key recovery and user management, and the second thing is your identity contract. So what you typically do is you sign a transaction on the phone, and it sends it through this controller contract. We will check, hey, is it the right person who has the right to this identity contract, and then interacts with the blockchain. So from a perspective of a smart contract or from an application, it always you appear as the same individual. Even if you have maybe multiple phones, or if you lose your phone, you can recover access to your identity, and that's I think a fundamental building block to build reputation. Because if you have a private key and you lose it, and you come back the next time and you're somewhere else, it just doesn't work. So these are just some elements which are core for our product. And I'll show you, I tried as well with the public, that's why a live demo. So what you see here now, I will open with my phone. So here the application is super simple. At the moment you just have a certain set of information you can enter. You have maybe certain validations, and we'll talk about this in a second. And then accounts. At the moment we just run on the Ring-B testnet, but you will have the ability to interact with multiple networks and multiple accounts in these networks. That's also part of the privacy aspect, that you might want to act with different identities. So how does it work? Very simple, obviously. You connect to it with a QR code, and what it did now, it got the information about what's the website, what information, what is the website requesting, and now I can decide whether I want to share this. So when I click on continue, it should hopefully log me in. So this is a website I have never visited before. I don't need to create an account there. It's just something which this website now can capture certain information about myself, like what I photo or something else. And now I want to show just how interaction with a blockchain would look like. So what we do here is we just basically simulate, we buy some shares. And the interesting thing now is that typically with all these situations, you never know what you're actually signing. Yeah? So you have like something happens on the website, and then you use your private key to sign a transaction, and we expect users to understand what they actually do. So we are now spending a lot of time how we design this user interface and make it very clear for users to know that they're not signing something stupid. So what you see now here came as a push notification, so you just do this QR code scan once, and after that you just receive this kind of information. So what you see here now is it's a function call, which is kind of like update shares, number is 5, and so at this moment you at least have some sense what it is. What we're building in the future is that you can customize these things for, let's say, if JP Morgan wants to do a transaction, this can be branded and maybe modified like to specific needs of a specific application. So in the moment when I now press approve, it will require the private key, and that's protected with your with secure enclave. So when I put my finger on it, it will now take the key, does a signature, creates the whole transaction on the phone. So this is not sent somewhere in a raw format. It happens on the phone, so the signature happens, and then it sends it to the network. And that means there's no third party which can interject this. So it's happening in the phone, and that's I think very important from a security perspective. What we do now is it takes the 15 seconds. We use also the Ring-B network for the transaction to be mined, and then hopefully, yeah. So now you get so the number of shares increased. You see a transaction here. I can now look it up, but I guess you can believe that worked. And so that's kind of the very basics of the system itself. So what we do now, we have now something which we can register on the blockchain. We can prove that we are in control of it, and it's persistent, because if we lose it, if we lose my phone, I can recover it. That's like very important things. So what I can do now is I can use this persistent identifier and start collecting attestations or verified claims to me. So if I now visit someone and this person or this bank issues me, hey, you're a customer here, or you're older than 18, or yes, you have more than 100 bitcoins, or something else. All this information is information I can receive now, signed from the issuer. So JP Morgan can issue me, yes, I'm a client, and I have more than $10,000 on my account. This information I can receive now, digitally signed from JP Morgan's identity to my identity, and I have now this in the form of a verified claim. So it's signed data. It's not any document which I can Photoshop or something else. It's something I can then take and show someone else. And the receiving party can always go back, check in the blockchain that the person who's holding the key who gave me this is actually the right identity who collected this attestation. And that opens up a lot of cool things. So I don't want to go through all of them now, given the time, but from KYC, which you go through a few times only, you can reuse all of these things again and again. Whether it's a reputation you gain because you are on a marketplace. At the moment you have Airbnb and you were a great host for 10 times, and you would get this attestation to yourself, then you could reuse it somewhere else. At the moment you're stuck, all your things are always within this one platform, and you cannot really build a reputation which is portable with you. And all of these things, whether it's a portable reputation, whether it's preferences you have in Spotify, you can go somewhere else. This is all the things, if you collect all this data, like this rich data to yourself, you can do really cool use cases. And that's something like in the near future we will add something here into our application, which is exactly this KYC functionality. So you can go here in verification and can say get verified, and this pulls some data, for example, from a third party where you go through like a KYC process, and then you can take this information and go to open law and say, hey, I'm actually Copenhagen, and the signature is actually connected to me. So this builds like a really important cornerstone. So I will skip this one. So this one, what we did there was a demo where you upload a file, and then you can actually make a hash and you sign this, and you register this into the blockchain. So that's a project we did with one government entity. I show you this one. That takes about a minute, and I will talk about this. So what we did in Switzerland is they said they want to do this kind of thing for their citizens. So what you do here basically is you log in to first into their portal and you start registering. Because in the beginning you just have this random uPort identity, nobody cares about this. And what you can do is now you can register themselves. You go to the portal, enter your details, and just submit this to the registration office there in the city, and then that's it. After that, and we need to, that's why we need to record it. Now someone on the other side will basically, an administrator will now verify. You go to the office now, you show your passport, you show your verification, and then what they can do is basically they go into their portal, they verify the information you registered is actually connected to you. So now suddenly I connect my digital identity, which is self-sovereign and only created for myself, with some legal confirmation from a city. And that's what basically this project is, what we just launched in Switzerland. Now what you see, we receive an attestation, this verified claim from the city of Zug, which contains my name, my birthday, and other information. And now what they start in Q1 next year is that they will offer first digital services where you as a user go, you log in with your identity, and then you can do some simple voting. It's not like voting, but it's more like opening times of your swimming pool or something else. It's not, not quite that. But it's the first step, I think, which is really awesome. I think that's quite promising. So I talked already private and public chains. We combined both of this. And we are already now in the upstream. So at the moment we're still in an alpha phase where we want as many people as possible to start building and integrating with us, give us feedback that we can build into what I know, all these cool projects which are around this to integrate this and use uPort going forward. uPort is one lessons. uPort is working very closely with many other blockchain-based identity solutions, so that we build at the moment global standards. So it's not a lock-in with our company or with our tool, that we're building something which works across the industry, even cross blockchains. So we're working with Sovereign and with some Bitcoin companies and so on. So that's something which is not purely Ethereum, but our tool is the interface to Ethereum transactions. And I think that's where the combination with uPort is interesting for this audience. Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, I love what you guys are working on. What exactly actually gets persisted to the blockchain? In particular, any sensitive data on the blockchain?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So on the blockchain, you have actually no personal data at all. We're working a lot like off-chain and on the phone at the moment. On the blockchain, there's only two things. There's the registration of your identity with the key, and we have at the moment a smart contract which defines a set of delegates who can recover your identity. No data at all.
Is this on?
Yeah.
So I have a question from the
how does the problem of locking look? Like, what if they want to move to another identity provider? How would that work?
Another provider, so at the moment this QR code situation is something we're working with that group to standardize this, so that the login is not bound to only us. But that's something, depending how the rest of the industry is adopting this, that's something we can only influence. We can't really say whether, depending who you work with, yeah. So that's part of this, the Decentralized Identity Foundation, which is a group of like 6 startups and startups together with Microsoft, now IBM, Accenture, and others have joined us. That is an industry, a cross-industry effort to make this a standard. So that's kind of the best thing we can do.
And how did uPort make money?
That's a lot of things. I think there are multiple things. So obviously, if you want to talk about an integration with private chains, you have typical license opportunities, or like branding, other things. What we are thinking is as well, there are opportunities in the public space where people might say they want to remove the whole friction of any user need to have Ether before they interact with it. So if open laws is like, okay, we want people just to use that, and a tiny transaction is like, it costs hardly anything. What we are building at the moment is the capability that this gas cost would be automatically paid through us, and basically we can charge this to the DApp providers, for example. There we have listed, I think, with 20 different other ideas. So it's just like, it's a lot of things. At the moment for us, we're part of ConsenSys, so for us it's very important that this works, because we have 50 other projects which are depending on it. So even if we don't make money, it's important for the whole ecosystem.
So Touch ID is like the coolest thing ever. How are you thinking about what carriers, mobile manufacturers are doing with, say, like Face ID or mobile PIN codes, multi-factor authentication?
So
happen at the application level?
So at the moment, also a very good question. So at the moment what we do is we use the mobile phone's security that you're paying with. Whether it's now a PIN, a pattern, or a face, or a Touch ID, doesn't really matter. That's like just a protection for the key in the enclave. The more complicated, like I think what we're working on now is how do we make sure that the phone is not taken from someone else? Because the PIN is something easy, like people can steal and then use this phone. There are multiple companies today who are building more protected biometrics like behavior, how do you type, how do you walk, where are you, anything which is kind of weird. So what we want to build is a more hierarchical set of keys which have different authorities to do certain things or not. So for example, you can say, okay, normal transactions of up to a certain amount you can just do with your phone. In some other cases you might need a second device. There might be things where you just need a PIN, or in some cases you might need a PIN plus your fingerprint. I think where there's so much possible, we have at the moment the most simple solution, which is just using the standard default from the operating system. Sure.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.